Hello everybody and welcome back to the Gaming Power-Ups. On today's video, we'll be doing another buying guide on the Game Boy Advance. Game Boy Advance is an awesome little handheld. I was so happy when this thing came out. It fit nicely in the hands. The screen was awesome. It was backlit, or sorry, not backlit, but it was color. More colors. It was a 32-bit system as opposed to the Game Boy Color, which was a sometimes it felt like it was like an 8, but it was a 16. A lot of games that were on the Super Nintendo got actually ported over to the Game Boy Advance in kind of one way or another, which I'll touch on a little later in the video. Couple of things to note about the Game Boy Advance is this model here does not come with built-in batteries. You need to supply your own batteries. My cover is actually missing because there was a little battery pack that I would put in the back, and that was able to charge them as I was playing just on the wall, or to be able to take it on the go and have a little bit longer charge. With that being said, there was the downfall, as I'll show you the ports on the end here. So you had your volume, you had your on and off, you had your headphone jack, but there, and your Game Link port, there is no way for you to plug this into the wall on its own. Unfortunately, I don't know why Nintendo took it out, but it's a good thing to note. They do sell accessories. Some of them are actually just a battery pack, or sorry, a battery pack, yes, and they also have a battery cover that actually has a built-in port that you can plug it directly in the wall. You won't be able to walk around with it, but if you're just going to go on a gaming binge and didn't care that you were right by a wall plug, then that was a good option to go to. So if not with this one, you will need a good handful of batteries with you if you're going to be playing for a long time. I find with Nintendo, they usually nail the battery life on their on a lot of their systems, and on their even their wireless controllers and stuff like that. They've done a really good way of being able to maximize the life of your battery. So with this does not have a backlight. So unfortunately, just like you would with the Game Boy or Game Boy Color, you would need to have some type of light. Now I had, it was called light armor, and it was just like a little piece that kind of went up on top, as I'll show you here, and then it would fold down over the screen to kind of help protect it. There was a little light that was built in it as well. It worked pretty good. I'm a fan of the worm light, just because I can just put it in any kind of direction I was looking at that made it the best viewing pleasure for myself. Now, the one thing to note is that if you've got it for your Game Boy Color, for your Game Boy Advance, you would need to turn it around. So when you plug it into your Game Boy Color, it would plug in this way with the port facing that way. The Game Boy Advance, you would just turn it, or rebend your worm light just to kind of see onto the Game Boy Advance screen. So that was the first. This is the show you guys the model number here. It is the AGB001. So again, this is the very first Advance that came out. It was very comfortable in the hands, and then it also added your left and right bumpers onto it. Still has the same A, B directional pad and your start and select. So Nintendo said, okay, we see your Game Boy Advance, and we're gonna up it. We're gonna make the Game Boy Advance SP. So the SP is awesome. I've spent more hours on this one than I did the other one, because this one has a backlight. Yay! Finally, Nintendo had made a backlight for their Game Boy Pocket and never thought to kind of continue that. So finally, with the Game Boy Advance SP, you could play in the dark. You could play, in the sunlight. You could play anywhere. It didn't matter. So you had a button here. This button here is just to turn on and off the backlight. Everything is almost pretty much the same with it. You still have, you have the convenience of it folding, which was great. So it kind of helped protect the screen. As you can see, the top part of this, how well it shows up. You can see all those scratches and whatnot. But that saved it all from the screen. I'd rather be on the top of the shell than on the front of my screen. So kept your L and R buttons, kept your start, select, D-pad, A and B. Again, this is just your brightness control. You've got your volume control on the side. You have your on and off. But the one thing that it did do away with was the headphone jack, unfortunately. So now, I would rather have the ability to, what they did was add rechargeable batteries in here. So it did come with a wall plug, and this is your wall plug right here. You plug it into this port here. It's right beside the link cable adapter. And that was phenomenal. It's great that you were able to charge it. No more batteries. You weren't having to run around with it anymore. But they did remove the headphone jack. So if you wanted, it was a third-party attachment, just kind of like your iPhones will have, is you have to plug it in here, and then it would have a headphone jack built into it, and then, you know, you could listen to it that way. It's kind of the only downfall is they took that away, especially with it being a handheld device. I don't know why you'd want to take away headphones, because, I mean, that's a way that you would play it, you know, especially if you're, you know, commuting, or you're in an area where you don't want to make a lot of noise, but you still want to hear your game. That's one thing to kind of look for. Couple things to look out for when buying these. You know, as the Game Boy Advance itself is pretty robust. It's pretty sturdy. It didn't really have very many issues. Obviously, you know, shake it around if you can hear anything loose inside, kind of thing. But with the Game Boy Advance SP, a lot of times the hinge, so you can hear it. See how well it picks up on the camera, but you see that little hinge. So there's a hinge that's inside here. And you've got these two on the side. So what ends up happening is that over time, if you get it off somebody who was younger, who was really rough with it, and, you know, would constantly push it back, you know, slam it forward and whatnot, they get loose and it won't stay like this. So that's how it should be. It should sit like this. Some of them they sit like this, and then, you know, the hinge have broken. They're not very hard to replace. They're a little bit challenging because you got to take the whole thing apart, and they just pop out these two little pieces on the side here. I've done it a bunch of times. It does save the Game Boy if everything else is working properly, but keep an eye out for that. It's not game changing. I mean, really, it's just you're holding it a little bit differently. But if that doesn't bother you and you find it for cheap, why not? Other thing to note is with the rechargeable batteries, it should always be flat. You should never have this back part here bulging. That's a good key indicator that that battery is on its way out or on its way to blow up. Now, I mean, it's not going to like blow up like an explosion, but, you know, it will start to leak battery acid, which is a big no-no. You don't want to do that. You can change them out. See if I can get this to focus in here. And okay, so it's kind of hard to pick up on here, but it is just a Phillips head screwdriver, and then you can pop that out, and then they sell the replacement batteries on eBay. So again, a nice little a way to, if you score one that's kind of got a bulging battery, there is a way to swap it out. You cannot play this without a battery. Now, I don't know if you take the battery out and just plug it in the wall if it'll work. I've actually never tried that, but I mean, I can't see why it wouldn't. So they did do two versions of the SP. So this is the AGS 101, or sorry, the AGS 001. They did make the AGS 101. So this is a modded case, or not a modded case, but it's a new shell case that I put on it. I actually have a video that I showed you guys how to put this all together if you guys are interested on that. Especially if you pick up one of these, it's really scratched up and you want to get something that's really cool, or even just a replacement just to make it look, give it a little refresher. So with the AGS 101, you have, and you can see the difference already in the screen. So you can tell just by opening it that you have this one here is the original SP, the AGS 001, how it has kind of that gray background, and the 101 has a black background. So this is the better screen. This is the one that's more sought after. They didn't make as many. This was in the later life of the Game Boy Advance. If you are looking for the best possible screen for your Game Boy Advance, I would go with the AGS 101. Now, the default colors they came in is Onyx Black, it was pearl metallic pink, and then a light blue as well. So it's those three specific ones, and there was a couple of special bundled ones. Like I know SpongeBob had an AGS 101 screen in it, so they do exist. Mine doesn't have a sticker on the back, but it will be here. If I can get this to focus. Let's see, we can get that to focus on there. There we go. So you see that AGS 101. Okay, it'll say AGS 101, but again, the big tell is the black screen. If you open it up and it doesn't have that gray screen, try to do this one-handed. Okay, gray screen, AGS 101, 001, sorry, black screen, AGS 101. So now, let's get on to accessories. All right, so one other thing to note too, though, is that, you know, I have fairly large hands, and I don't get, my hands don't cramp very often holding this. I mean, if I'm, a couple hours into being on this, maybe my hands will hurt a little bit. I do know that a lot of people do kind of complain about the fitment in your hands. And a lot of people are more partial for the original style Game Boy Advance. Now, there are people out there that do mod these things, that put an AGS 101 screen. It's a project I have on the go right now, as I have another one of these that I'm trying to put a screen into. So it is a possibility. People do make them. People do mod them. It is a possibility to find them out in the wild. So if you are kind of looking for something a little bit different and something that's a little bit better fit in your hands, they've even got battery packs now for them that they make them rechargeable and stuff like that. So you don't need to worry about carrying batteries on you as well. That's another option as well. So accessories. So worm light for your Game Boy Advance, because you need to be able to see. The link cable, a jumbled up set of wires here. So this one here is the one that came with my Game Boy Color, starter pack. So this one will go into the original Game Boy. This one is your Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. Now, I have tried a couple of different wires, and some of them will work Game Boy Advance to Game Boy Advance, but some of these older cables, for whatever reason, will not work Game Boy Advance to Game Boy Advance. Like, they are the same, inputs. They are the same plugs, but there's something that they've done differently. So if you're looking exclusively to get something that is for your Game Boy Advance, I would look on Amazon for one that specifically says Game Boy Advance on it, and not just for Game Boy Color. You'll be able, again, to be able to go from Game Boy Advance to Game Boy Color and be able to trade Pokemon or something like that through there. You're more than welcome to do it that way. But if you're looking for something to battle friends with or trade Pokemon with a Game Boy Advance, you really got to look for a link cable that is the GBA or the Game Boy Advance link cable. These all have kind of the same accessories that you would find for like your Game Boy Colors and stuff. It had the magnifying glass, the battery pack, which I spoke about, the wall plug adapter. I find with the Game Boy Advance SP, you really, unless you really want headphones, as long as you've got the wall plug for it, you really don't need anything else beyond that. Especially with the AGS 101, it does have dual brightness in it. So you're able to get this to work here. So you're able to go from this brightness and to even brighter. So I don't know how well that shows up, but it's bright, a little dimmer, brighter, dimmer, just like so. So that's kind of cool that they, you can't turn it off. You can't turn the backlight off, but you are able to dim it or make it a little bit brighter. Obviously, the brighter that it is, the longer it will, the less time you will have with your battery life. So again, with accessories, not a whole lot for the SP. Again, just really it's the link cable and the adapter for your headphones if you're looking for that. But again, if you're not, as long as you find one of these wall plugs, and if it doesn't come with it, they're fairly cheap on Amazon, usually about 10-15 bucks, and you've got yourself one. Or sometimes they have ones that are good for Game Boy Advance, PSP, DS. It's kind of like a, one of those wires that splits in a couple of different areas for a couple of different systems too. So those are usually relatively easy to find. Again, the best thing to look for is your hinges are good, screen's good, battery pack is not swelling. And again, with this one here, as long as everything's really, as long as you've got, at least the cover, it won't impede, you playing, but obviously it's uncomfortable when you've got your hands back here. But yeah, so I would say let's move on to some games. Actually, just before we get into games, I forgot to mention one of the most important to me, coolest things that the Game Boy Advance through all three of these models do is they all play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games, which is fantastic. So you get to play your Game Boy Color games with a backlight if you choose to use the SP. And they will upscale color and stuff like that. And because the screen's actually a little bit wider than a normal Game Boy game, when you play the Game Boy, because obviously there was no use of the L and R buttons, it actually it shrinks the screen a little bit. So you'll have either black bars, or you hit the L button and it will stretch it to the entire screen, or R will return it back to the normal size screen for regular Game Boy games, which is really awesome to be able to go back and forth and, have even more reasons to never put this thing down, to be able to play all those games. So now we will get on to the games. So as we have here, and I know what you guys are saying, you guys are going, Anthony, we know you love Pokemon, and you guys are right. I love Pokemon. Pokemon is the one game franchise out of only a couple that I have played from day one that I still love and enjoy now. Playing them 20 some odd years later, and still have to get every generation, at least one of them, just so I can play through it, because I love their games. They are the only real turn-based RPG that I actually like to play, and it was only until recently that me and my buddy Donnie actually were like, wait a minute, as we were talking about turn-based games, we're like, wait a minute, Pokemon is a turn-based game. That's the only one that we like. So they have your Pokemon Ruby and Pokemon Sapphire. These ones are new gen Pokemons. They've got Leaf Green, Fire Red, which are, your remake of Pokemon Red and Blue, and Pokemon Pinball, just because I love me some pinball. All right, next up, got Castlevania. I highly recommend, if anybody is a fan of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, any of the GBA Castlevania games are an homage to it. They're fantastic, great little handhelds, and they keep your attention for quite a bit of time. Next up is your Metroid. You've got Metroid Fusion, which kind of was a twist on the Metroid, and then Metroid Zero Mission, which was kind of explaining some of the, it was almost kind of like a prequel to Super Nintendo. So, some of the the first party Nintendo games become a little bit more difficult to find for cheaper prices. So just be on the lookout for that some of these you will pay a little bit more of a premium price for, just because, everybody loves some Mario, and they love Zelda, and they love Pokemon. So one thing that I thought was really cool with the Game Boy Advance is that they made these NES Classic series games. So these are the NES games ported over to the Game Boy Advance. So your original Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link, Super Mario Bros, Metroid. So it was really cool that they took the NES games and ported them over to the Game Boy Advance. They also made little movies, or little TV episodes that were built on a game cartridge as well. I don't have any of them. But it was something that was kind of cool too, that you could kind of just watch a Pokemon episode on your Game Boy. So next up, racing games, because who doesn't love racing games? You've got F-Zero, and you've got the industry standard kart racer, Mario Kart. Fantastic addition to Game Boy Advance, and a lot of multiplayer fun with that one. So another thing that they introduced with the Game Boy Advance was the Super Mario Advance series. So you had Super Mario Advance, which was Super Mario Brothers 2 for the NES. You had Super Mario Brothers 2, which is Super Mario World for the SNES. Number 3, which was Yoshi's Island. Number 4, which is Super Mario Brothers. So again, really cool that they were able to bring some Super Nintendo games as well and port them over to the Game Boy Advance. Really fun games. And they look really great. They don't look any different than I think they look a little bit better on the SP, or the Game Boy Advance rather than the Super Nintendo, almost, dare I say. Last couple of games here. Again, you know me, Legend of Zelda. I can't not have a Legend of Zelda game in my collection. So Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. So this is the one that they had for Super Nintendo. They did have the addition of the Four Swords Adventure. Now, the only thing I will warn you is that you do need to have at least one other player to play the Four Swords Adventure. It was something that they added onto it, but you needed to have a friend who had his own copy of this so that you guys could play through it together. A little bit of a drag because they never really released it on its own. They did as a DSi game, but it's really hard to come by. So, I've heard it's really fun. It's kind of like the one for the GameCube, so kind of cool if you got a friend that has one. You guys can play through kind of a different story mode on Legend of Zelda. And then the Minish Cap is a fantastic game. You use the ability to go up to be normal size and shrink down. Graphics, soundtrack, all amazing on these. You know, the Game Boy Advance is a plethora of games that they really nailed. They did, you know, started even doing some different things. So you even have, you know, Yoshi's Topsy Turvy. So this one here is interesting because they started off with the Game Boy Color with Kirby, and then they went over to the Game Boy Advance. So this, can't really hear it, but there's like a little gyroscopic, I don't know the exact technology, but it's motion control basically. So, and it asks you which style Game Boy Advance you're using. Either you're using the regular one or you're using your SP, so it knows which way that you need to move it. But you basically just move your, you know, you move your Game Boy Advance to move around Yoshi and stuff like that, which is really cool. Just shows you Nintendo always pushing the boundaries on what they can do with their video games. So this is a real cool one, just especially to have motion control in a Game Boy Advance. Like, who would have thought of that? Lastly, kind of a game, kind of an accessory, kind of both. So this is where you start getting into the multi-carts or the easy flash, you know, where you can dump your own ROMs onto a Game Boy Advance cartridge and play them through your Game Boy Advance. So all it is it's basically an SD card reader. I can't get my fingers in there, but there's an SD card slot on the side. My shell has seen better days, but it pops on the side. You upload games or ROMs from your computer. I will not tell you where to get them, but you can find them online, and then you would load them on here. This is great if you know you're going on the go somewhere and you don't want to bring a plethora of games with you. You just kind of want to bring the games that you already have. You know, I actually just like to be able to, I have a reader for my Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games. So then I'll just pop them on here so I can play the ROMs on the go. So a really cool way to do it, or to kind of try some games out. You know, if you don't know that you like some of the games that are shown here or some of the other ones that are a little bit more expensive, it is a good way to know if you're going to like that game or not. Nothing like going to spend, you know, $50 in a game that you don't know if you want, and then you're like, ah, I wasted my money kind of thing. So I really highly recommend anytime you can get these flash carts that you can pop an SD card in. It just makes for gaming on the go a lot easier. One thing I didn't show accessory / game wise is the Action Replay or the Game Shark. They did have one for Game Boy Advance. You know me, of course, I love using it for Pokemon games, you know, because that's how you catch them all if you don't have a friend to link up with. So guys, let me know in the comments below. Did I miss anything out? Is there an accessory that was a must-have for your Game Boy Advance that you guys that I didn't touch upon? You know, let me know in the comments as well. Which one of these is your favorite? Are you the original style Game Boy Advance, or are you the SP kind of person? So guys, thanks for watching my buying guide. If you guys got anything that any burning questions or not, let me know in the comments. Let me know on Instagram at the Gaming Powerups. You know, let's have a chat. So guys, until next time, game on.